Good evening. My name is Johanna Koljonen and you are watching Crosstalks, a collaboration between two of Sweden's leading universities, Stockholm University and KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology. Do join us in discussing today's topics on Twitter, where our handle is Crosstalks TV and our hashtag is Crosstalks. Access to clean energy is one of the modern world's most fundamental challenges. It is both a central part of our struggle to create a more sustainable world and a cause of political conflict and wars. While unsustainable energy sources are peaking, nuclear power remains controversial, new greener energy sources are gathering momentum, though not without their own problems and challenges. How can we meet future needs for power and energy efficiency? What are the most interesting technologies, projects and policies? How will the quest for energy affect the political and economic landscape? With me to discuss these questions are Thomas Jonter, Professor of International Relations at the Department of Economic History, Stockholm University, Semida Silveira, Professor in Energy Systems Planning, KTH Royal Institute of Technology, and Henric Bergsåker, Assistant Professor and Researcher at the Department of Fusion Plasma Physics, KTH Royal Institute of Technology. Please give them a warm welcome. So, Thomas, you're a professor in international relations and economic history, and you've studied nuclear energy and energy security. Why is the access to energy an important area of study for social sciences?
Well, first of all, I don't think if you put an energy production system in place, it's not just about research and development investments, technical investments. It's also, you do that in a political, societal context. I would say it's a techno-political system, not just an energy system. So in order to be successful or unsuccessful, you could also fail in doing that, you need to take into account a number of aspects. First of all, politicians have to take decisions, and decision makers need basic information, figures, facts, data. And it's not just technical data, because an energy production system will have impact on a society on a regional basis, also on a national and also global basis. So it has impact on how you build houses, how you city planners are planning for new cities, building of smart houses, how we transport each other. So it's a number of societal aspects that have to be taken into account. And also legally, I mean, you have to regulate energy system, legislation. You mentioned nuclear power is very controversial today. Yes, but it's heavily regulated. Just certain operators is allowed to do that, and they have to follow international legislation. IAEA taking control, have international inspectors coming, for instance, to Sweden to check that's not doing bad things and so on and so forth, and a national legislation. So we need a number of competences to put an energy production system or upgrade an old energy system.
I'd like to follow that up with almost a yes or no question. Do you think, in that case, because this was a very good answer, are there enough social scientists looking at these kinds of technological fields like energy production today?
A very good question. I would say not enough good social scientists.
Very good. Now that's an inspiration for our students in the audience. Semida Silveira, your work focuses on multiple dimensions of energy systems transformation and global challenges such as climate change and sustainable development. I'm starting to realize that follows up very well on what we just heard. Now, what are the issues that you find most interesting in your field right now?
Well, we are moving towards a new paradigm, the paradigm of sustainability. We are more aware of the impacts of energy harnessing and using in our society. We are also much more aware, I would say, of the value added that comes with energy. And at the same time, we have different technological solutions that we can use. And these together, I think, brings opportunities for thinking the energy solution in society in a very different way. We are just beginning to see those transformations, and I think it's going to be very interesting. although perhaps quite difficult because we have to plan it differently.
So when you are saying thinking about them in a different way, do you mean thinking about them in a sort of ecosystem sense almost as was just described, or do you mean that we would use different kinds of technologies?
Well, I think actually it's both in a way, but personally I'm not so focused on the technology itself. I have full respect for the technology. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to work in a technical university. But that's only part of the solution. I agree very much with what Thomas said, because we have to make some choices. And also, when making these choices, we can make very different choices today than we were able to do before. At the same time, we have this pressing issue of climate change, pushing for us to make decisions as soon as possible. So it is not only about we're going to be more sustainable over time, but the climate change agenda puts a kind of a time schedule for that.
And that's a very urgent time schedule as well. So the decisions need to be made sooner than we would like to.
Absolutely.
I think scientists and people who are interested in science, like myself, I think we always say, well, it would be very nice to do some 20 additional years of studying on this before we decide. But we don't have 20 years. These decisions need to be made now.
Exactly, and I think we should go away from the thought that we will have the ultimate solution. We are not going to have the ultimate solution. The development is a moving target. Also, development of technology is a moving target. So the day we are implementing something, then we already have a glimpse of something new coming. And so we cannot wait for all the answers before we have to move on, because development is not waiting.
I felt that yes, we were moving very well into, because there might be an ultimate solution coming. I think we need to do all of these other changes first, because it's not here tomorrow. Henric, your work is in nuclear fusion. And that has been around as a potential future power source for a very long time. I seem to remember that more than 20 years ago, when I was in school, I was told, any day now, soon, we will have answers. It's been very promising for quite some time, so to speak, providing we can make this technology work. It's not yet ready for use. Could you tell us, how far are we from nuclear fusion in casual use? How far are we from technological success?
Well, you're absolutely right that it's been talked about and worked on for a long time, and it's been sold as a future solution. It has a great potential as a sustainable base support for a base energy source. It's got, we have availability of fuel for millions of years. There isn't any waste problem in the same way as with fission power, and there isn't any risk of catastrophic disasters. So the thing is that when work started in the 1950s, 60s, it looked much easier than it turned out to be. The main line of research is heating an ionized gas of hydrogen up to very high temperatures, 200 million degrees or something like that, and confine it with a magnetic field. And it turned out that this is such a complex system that it was more difficult than people thought originally. So it took a long time to solve the plasma physics problems there.
Excuse me, did you just say 200 million degrees?
Yes.
Okay, that is a very high temperature. Yes, no, that doesn't sound entirely easy for me.
Yeah, it's
but that is solved
20
now.
times higher temperature than in the center of the sun. But it's of course it's a very small volume, and it's not very dense matter in there. Anyway, these basic plasma physics problems, I think, are well understood now. Actually, 20 years ago or something like that, I think it's fair to say that it's been shown that fusion works, that one can get energy out of it more than we put in. But the situation now is that the European community has decided on a roadmap for fusion that really establishes the deadlines that need to be met in order to make a fusion reactor option available. And that's a very good thing, because that's been lacking before. And we have a clear plan on how to reach there. So the first step now is that there is an international test facility being built in the south of France, ITER, and that's going to be operating around 2020. It's planned to produce 500 megawatts of fusion power, and that would be with 50 megawatts of input, so it gets 10 times more energy out than put in. And this research facility is going to be used to work on engineering types of problems which remain to be solved. The things that need to be done are, it's necessary to find out exactly what size fusion reactor should be and how it should be operated in an efficient way. There are a number of engineering types of problems that need to be solved, in particular materials problems having to do with very high heat loads on surfaces and with radiation damage to construction materials. So the plan is to study this with this international collaborative device, and then as a single step then to get to the stage where there could be commercial fusion reactors built, there is going to be another big machine built, probably designed starting 2030, and it would be operating by early 2040. And in this case, it's the idea is that it should be delivering some few 100 megawatts of electric power to the grid. So when we get to 2048, 2050, there should be an alternative where reasonable technical solutions have been found, and where there is a good idea of the economy, because what it all boils down to is actually the cost of electricity from fusion power that we will. Yeah.
I think a lot, I mean, if you're sitting in the audience now, on average, you are a student, and you will think, well, 2040, that is pretty far in the future. I think if you are sitting on the stage, you are on average older, and we can tell you that 2040 will be any day now. It's very, very soon. So also, if you're in material sciences, what an exciting thing to get involved with. This is going to be like the space program, and in practical terms, perhaps much more important for humanity. I don't know exactly how to balance now, because of course this is very exciting. It's a wonderful vision. We all want it to come true. Would that solve our problems then, Semida?
Well, I think actually what Henric just said confirmed a little bit what I said. I mean, we are of course moving the frontier all the time in what solutions we can offer. But, I mean, until 2040, 2050, people will still need to have electricity, people will still need to develop, people will need energy. And what are we going to do to provide that energy? So what happens is that we are moving the frontier all the time, and meanwhile you have also tracks that we are used to follow, and they tend to stay. So you need to mobilize, like this case, you have to mobilize the society to actually make it happen. It would not happen without a major mobilization of the research community and of the decision makers to actually say, no, we're going to build this, we're going to make it happen. So in 100 years' time, maybe this has been disseminated far enough, but in between, we need to have other alternatives.
Thomas Jonter.
Yeah, I would follow up on that. I think you're absolutely right, and I think Henric is working on very important issues, research issues, and I think technically you're right, and in the future it's possible to have that solution. But once again, we should not forget the political, societal context here, and you're right. It costs enormous of capital to put that in place, to make it marketable, to work, function in a daily basis, and we need a lot of heavy investments. Remember, when nuclear power, for instance, we could have different views on the good to use, if it's good to use nuclear power or not, but it was subsidized from the governments all over the world, in United States, in Sweden, and heavy investments and R&D industry could, so to speak, have a lot of long-term plans. Mm-hmm. Today we have a different view on that. Everything should stand on its own leg. It should be paid by the market itself. So in that
And the
sense, we have
market
to
is
change.
heavily invested in old systems, so it's not very much in their interest to find something that's essentially
It
free
cannot
energy.
afford it. Cannot afford it. I mean, here we talk
The
about
risk is too high.
hundreds of billions of investments. What
Even in the case of success, the risk is too high. And in the case of success, of course, you also destroy all your existing business models as well. I'm wondering, do you think we can even accurately predict energy needs in the future? Will humanity need more or less energy?
Of course, we can and we cannot, I would say, if I can start. First of all, we have to carry on doing analysis and so on and so forth, but we have to distinguish between short-term prospects and medium-term and long-term. Short terms, we know that we're going to be more people on this planet. Today we are, roughly speaking, 7 billion people here on this planet. And demographers have different views what's going to take part in the demographic growth pictures in the future. But they are, the majority of them agree that we will have at least between 9 and 10 billion people on this planet 20, 30 years from now. That means we are more and more people on this planet, but also more people that will consume more, because we at the same time see an economic takeoff in regions of the world where we used to call the third world, like in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And they, of course, will produce more products, and that means more energy. So in that sense, we know that we need more energy. Having said that, technical innovation could build smarter systems, smarter houses that needs less energy to heat and so on and so forth. But still, in 20, 25 years prospect, we know. But then we're talking about 50, 70 years from now. It's very hard to make predictions.
Yeah, I think you're right that, of course, we know that the population is increasing, and you have a kind of a pretty much a good idea and good methods to calculate when the turn will come. But at the same time, I think we need to think a little bit differently, because for many years, IEA was doing this evaluation of long-term evaluation of energy demand, and it gave the impression that it could grow forever. And it would grow forever. There will be resources forever. Maybe as much as we will live many generations, we can say the sun will shine forever, but not even the sun will shine forever. But okay, let's say it will shine forever.
From a human perspective, let's say it will shine forever.
Exactly. And then, eventually, they were asked to make a scenario that would give us at least a hint of what we need to do it differently. And I think that's how we need to think. It's not like, of course, if we don't do anything, we will destroy ourselves. It has happened before. Other civilizations have done it before us. Yeah. They didn't pay attention, and they destroyed their own society. But knowing the limits that we have in terms of natural resources, knowing also that previously we didn't pay so much attention on how much actually we waste of energy, not paying attention that actually we could have put much more effort in exploring the energy that is in the sun. We have put efforts in other places. We have put much, if you look at the research agendas over the past decades, most of the resources have gone to either fossil fuel-related research or nuclear power-related research. So it was no wonder, it's only in the last few decades that we started looking more into technologies for conversion with using renewables, but with a much lower budget. That's very clear. And we're still putting a lot of effort in those areas. So I think we need to review a little bit the agenda of research on energy. I think we will get back to that point.
Yes.
Later.
I think now joining us via Skype, calling in from Switzerland, I believe, is Dr. Arthur Wellinger, Technical Coordinator for the Bioenergy Agreement of the International Energy Agency, IEA. Welcome to Crosstalks.
Thank you. Welcome to you.
And now, Dr. Wellinger, you're working with bioenergy in different forms. What are the most interesting or promising technologies in your field as you see it?
Sorry, that's the wrong question.
Okay, tell me the question and then you can answer it.
I mean, you just introduced the renewable energies. I mean, first of all, bioenergy is not the only renewable energy, and it has a good deal to cover over the next years to come. But of course, we talk about solar energy, we talk about wind energy, we talk about wave energy, and so on, and so on. So we have to look at the whole of it. And I think from the answers of my colleagues who are with you in the same room, it becomes clear that we cannot say this is the solution and that is not the solution. So what we have to do is we have to use as soon as possible all available technologies and should not stop doing research for future technologies. I think you mentioned that. So this is just as an introduction. So as I say, bioenergy over the next few years, and when I say a few years, IEA is looking forward to 2050, and that's the most we can do. And still, this is highly risky. But they do have the models up to 2050. And until that time, bioenergy plays an important role. I don't want to give you now the energy figures because nobody knows what it is, exajoules. But anyway, it's a lot. It's up to a third of new energy that bioenergy can provide, depending on the scenario. So what is the advantage of bioenergy? It's a whole range of energies. So it covers all type of plant grown on this planet. It should not compete with nutrition for mankind, and it should not compete with feed for animals. And but we cannot look at bioenergy alone. We have to look at the whole biomass production, and that's the difficult thing. If you talk about wind, you talk about a technical solution. If you do look about PV, photovoltaics, you look at the single technical solution. Bioenergy is depending on a lot of things. So you cannot separate biomass for energy and for food and for feed. It's all in one. And we need all of those three. So when we talk about energy production, we should also talk about food production. And in fact, this is improving altogether. Only the discussion is separated into these different things. So at IEA, we try to think more and more integrated. Integrated means we talk about biorefineries, where you can use several times the same biomass. At the end, at the low value products, which is actually energy. And to start with, you use the high product biomass, giving paints, giving chemicals, giving whatever. So we look at the whole range.
Can I ask you, Dr. Wellinger? Sorry.
Yeah.
Because Professor Silveira was just saying that we have perhaps both the mainstream of the research field and IEA itself, indeed, have committed rather late to bioenergy, for instance, to renewables. Would you say now that shift has happened? For instance, is the International Energy Agency completely committed to bioenergy as a strategy?
I mean, IEA has recognized that the renewable energies are playing a major role until 2050. That's for sure. But they do not say that the other energies should be left out. No, we will have at least until 2030, 2040, we will live on oil primarily. And we still, unfortunately, will use a lot of coal. And I say unfortunately because this is the heaviest CO2 emission problem. But anyway, we still need it because we don't have all the solutions yet. But we have every year has to cut down the use of fossil fuels. And I think that is clearly recognized by IEA.
But do you agree that there is a no, let me rephrase that. There are systemic challenges to this shift that needs to happen because of entrenched interests and also tradition and just the general difficulty of sort of inertia. It's very difficult to think in new ways. What are the big challenges there, Dr. Wellinger, in shifting towards a more sustainable energy production system?
Well, it starts with politics. Before it was mentioned that politics has to play an important role. I would fully agree to that. But unfortunately, politicians are elected only at the longest every 4th year. So they think in terms of 4 years, and that's not long enough. So that's one of the problems we have to overcome. And then another thing which has been mentioned, and which is true for all energies, industry cannot invest in all types of energies at the same time to the amount it would be needed, unless they have the time to recover the money by selling this type of energy. Yeah. And this is also at the same time a political problem, because politicians, when they change the policy every 4th or every 5th year, then they don't get enough income to pay their development. So this is all interlinked. So these are really major challenges. And then there is a huge challenge when I talk about biomass, which is best agricultural practice. And this has nothing to do with energy. This is an old, very old problem. Yeah. The developed world never managed to educate the developing world how to grow best their crop under their climatic conditions. Yes. Unfortunately, these climatic conditions get more and more severe. I mean, we're running out of water. That's probably before we run out of energy, we run out of water. Yes, and this is all linked to...
I would just like to add to that, of course, that one of the effects of extreme weather events that are very likely to come is that we will need more heating and more cooling. So in itself, climate change also might become a driver of energy need. I'd just like to make this even more complicated by adding one an additional aspect. Semida, you've spoken about the 20% of the world's population who don't currently have electricity. Why is it important to bring them on board?
Well, the benefit, the wealth in the world has increased, and we have achieved enormous changes in terms of life quality. But unfortunately, 20% of the population is still, or more, actually more, but 20% when it comes to electricity has not had the privilege of having that. And we know that electricity is entry point for a number of new steps in the development process. And we know also that we can immediately think of the need of electricity for industrialization, but not only that, also for health. The Human Development Index almost doubles, in some places triples, with just a small increase in energy availability, particularly electricity, because then you have access to vaccines, you can actually have a better health care. Not to mention education. So life longevity, infant mortality decreases, life longevity increases. And so it is our responsibility in terms of, if we talk about global justice, it's our responsibility. And the big challenge is to actually put in place the mechanisms that will make that happen.
Thomas, would you like to come in here?
Sure, I agree. And Dr. Wellinger explained it in a very good way. It's not just about energy. It's water security, it's scarcity of water. It's climate change linked into that as well. Food security and energy. So it's interlinked, and we cannot just solve one aspect of the whole problem at a time. We have to tackle it in a wholeness. So I think it's very important.
Well, do you agree that politics is the key? Because then I think we're all in trouble. Then I'm not sure it's a solvable problem, because we're not going to change the structure of elective democracy in time to solve this problem. People will be re-elected every 4 years or every 6 years, depending on the country. So we need to find a way to speak on longer timescales.
Yeah, but I think it's about raising the awareness, and Dr. Wellinger is right. It's normally you have power in 4 years, sometimes even just 3 years. But on the other hand, we see certain decisions taken that go beyond just 4 years' time. I think we should take this climate change debate that we had for around 10 years now as something serious. And that means it's an obligation not just for sitting in power 5 years, it's go beyond that. So we have to be able to take decision with, that look into the future. And that means we have to work on an international level, involve international organization, regional organization, to, so to speak, strengthen the system, not to just be an issue that the political party or one government is taking care of. We have to see it in a broader way.
Am I right in thinking that some of your research has to do with nuclear power in the context of the Cold War specifically?
It used to be, yes.
Yes.
Now I try to look into
Yeah,
the
because I was
present
thinking
time.
then at least these technological advances were placed in a sort of ideological context that
Yes.
involved that citizens could in some sense identify with. Perhaps we need some kind of ideology that we would like to survive as a species, which I think is a message that is relatively easy to get behind, and organize in some manner that would be bigger than short-term politics. Do you, with your historical context, do you believe in this as a strategy?
Unfortunately, I would love to say yes, but we live in a different time, different circumstances. I mean, during the Cold War, we had two superpowers, United States and Soviet Union. They controlled each other, and they, so to speak, controlled one part of the world. Today, after the Cold War, we don't have two superpowers. We have new superpowers, or at least great powers, like China, with ambition to be superpowers. We have Brazil, India, and so on and so forth, in a different world, a multipolar world. So in that sense, it's harder today. And also, I would say, because of the emergent need for not just energy, water, resources. Some researchers talk about resource war. I think it's sometimes exaggerated, but I think we could talk about a new axis of conflict today. Okay, during the Cold War, it was about ideologies, power, different political systems, and of course we have that kind of political games today as well. But also energy and resources are new aspects, and I think the scarcity of it, so to speak, could lead to conflict. And we have seen it has led to conflict with Russia, involvement in Ukraine, the occupation of Crimea, and so on and so forth. So of course it plays a role.
It does strike me, Henric, that of course you're the only person here who is literally working on a very long-term plan. Do you have a reflection on what's just been said?
Well, at this stage, actually, from very early on, there's been a lot of international collaboration around fusion research. I mean, there was a good collaborative climate already between the Western world and the Soviet Union at the time. And this ITER project is something that's an example of really wide international collaboration. This experiment is being pursued by Europe, the United States, Russia, China, Japan, Korea, and India. And I think maybe it serves as an example of, I mean, this has many drawbacks, of course. It's nobody thinks that this makes things go faster or cheaper or anything, but I think there are positive aspects about this collaboration also, that everybody really participates and gets the know-how and so on.
Semida Silveira.
Well, yeah, on these time perspectives, I think that, for example, we are forming consortia to work in the cities. I mean, if you want to transform the city, you have to actually have many stakeholders participating, and you also have to have the city functioning all the time. So transforming a city is very difficult and very complicated, and it requires long term. And yet the cities are transformed. How? I mean, sometimes very radically. So I think it is, yes, I wouldn't push too hard on this idea that politicians only have 4 years, because otherwise soon there will be groups saying that, well, let's leave them there for a longer period, and I don't think that would be a better solution. I would prefer that we continue with the shift. Instead, I would think that if we have other types of stakeholders that have a different time perspective, like, for example, the researchers, like Henric, like other researchers. In the university, we have a different agenda. For example, we have to educate the students, we have to do research, and our time perspective is different than the political. Mm-hmm. And it's also different from the companies, because the companies, their time schedule is even shorter than the politicians.
Increasingly short now. Yes. It used to be at least about long term, but not so much now.
And then there are all the individuals, because people are also individuals and are making choices. And their perspective can be different depending on which their generation they belong to. So I think that multiplicity of participants in the process. It makes it more complex, yes, more difficult, yes. But as you say, now we have multiple superpowers or multiple candidates to power, and that is also the effect of democracy. And as we also use technology to enclose, to bring more people, so to bring more people to the pool, it will not be less complicated. Of course, it will not. Yeah, but it will be a possibility also for the people to also work in their own environment. I don't think everything is scale, because in history we have had different periods of development and sometimes more globalization. This is not the first time in history we have globalization. Of course, with different types of perspectives and technologies, but mercantilism was really globalized. So I think that, but it's still, you have had also periods with very local. So we have seen in Europe a lot of globalization, preoccupation with the role of Europe in the globe, but also at the same time a lot of local initiatives. In the energy, we have the subsidiary system in energy. So countries, we have a common agenda, but we also can do it differently in different countries.
I'm just going to ask a very layman's question that might come across as incredibly naive in the light of all the complexities we've just sketched out. Let's say that fusion is, since fusion is one of the most promising technologies for the future. Dr. Wellinger is shaking his head. I take note, but let's just put it out there as a possibility. Couldn't we just focus the world's resources? I guess, Henric, this question is to you. If we gave this project, this infrastructure, if we poured more resources in it, could the results come faster? Or is the time frame about just this is how long research takes, and it's not a resource issue really?
Firstly, I think it would be naive to think that there is some wonder solution that can do everything. I think we necessarily will have a mix of energy sources and so on. Secondly, I think this time schedule I mentioned is, I think it's too late to do anything faster at this point, because these things will take time, these materials tests and this develop. Any actually designing and constructing such big plants always takes a long time. So I think it's not. It can't be shortened at this point, I think, very much. I think it could have been kind of started up maybe 10 or 15 years earlier. And one of the reasons it wasn't is that these complications with, for example, ITER, there was a long discussion where to build it, if in Japan, in Europe, and so on, and how to divide the costs and so on. So there was a long period of such of that sort of problems. I think it could have been done faster then. On the other hand, as I said, it's a valuable thing with this collaboration because it may make everybody more prepared to go for it when it's when
so the collaboration creates a sense of
reactors at 2050. Then maybe we get that time back.
So the collaboration creates a sense of ownership that might actually make the political processes easier in implementation. Then I have to follow up on that on the protest there from Dr. Wellinger. You were perhaps shaking your head a little bit at the idea of fusion being the future, or did I read you correctly?
No, I have something against when you say, I mean, Henric told you that already. There is not the single best way, also not with fusion. And even though Henric is targeting for 2050 or even longer, I think this is still a very short period for that particular technology. I remember in the 70s, in the late 70s, I heard the first contributions about fusion. And then they said it will last 50 years before the first full-size plant will be built. And since then, I hear every year it will last 50 years. Now I hear again 25 years, and I don't know. So I don't doubt that at one stage you will get there, but don't make promises you can't keep. That's not good towards the politicians. Because I'm a layman, but from what I understand from my colleagues, you're really walking at the very edge of possible technologies. So it's no wonder that it takes time. I fully understand that. And but ask for the time, ask steadily for the time, and don't make promises. I think that's an important message.
Well, first, would you like to respond, or do you think it was a fair assessment?
No, I think that's true, I suppose. I mean, there was a lot of premature optimism in the beginning in particular. But I don't feel that it's too unrealistic at this point with such a time schedule. It won't be the optimal solution, surely. So more resources could help in. I mean, it has been this political things, but there's also been some different opinions on what kinds of solutions to choose to develop. So now there has been a choice, which is the one that was most advanced, maybe 20 years ago. But it's not obvious that this is ultimately the really best solution. I think what we will see is that it's maybe good enough.
And I think that also reflects the maturity of the field. That's another positive result of the fact that it takes longer. But then I'd like to expand this question again. So we agree that international collaboration and these kind of big structured projects can make amazing achievements. So should we have even more of these consortia? Is there any field? Okay, if you could just choose one field in the energy sector where you could pour a lot of resources into research right now, is there an answer to that question? What it should be? Should it be bioenergy? Thomas?
Yeah, but I think first of all we have to understand different countries have different views on this, and they have different conditions. They have different possibilities. We could take a country like Norway, for example, have a lot of hydropower. It's not any big interest of going into fusion technology. Of course, they have researchers doing this because they have hydropower enough to live on that for probably decades, even longer, forever. And you have countries like Sweden, who's between 40 and 50% of all electricity comes from nuclear power, and the rest from hydropower and some wind power and so on and so forth. And you have countries like Germany, who took a decision after the Fukushima accident to phase out nuclear power and instead will be dependent on coal power until 2022 when it will switch over to sustainable solution. That's at least their plan. So what I'm saying here, politics play a role, and each state has its own path dependency that, so to speak, trap in the system, infrastructures, R&Ds, investments, political games, and so on and so forth. So it's not just, okay, we cooperate and we will fix the best system. It doesn't work like that.
And of course, I do realize in a sense it's a very foolish question, because the more diverse your energy production system is, the less risky it is, the less sensitive it is. For instance, hydropower. In a time of water shortages and climate change, hydropower would seem long-term to be a relatively risky proposition, actually. But in the short term, again, it could be a solution. But I wonder.
Nevertheless,
yes.
your suggestion that bioenergy should be more looked more at, I think, is a correct assessment, because we have actually the largest majority of renewables that is used today is biomass. Half of it is, at least half of it, is traditional biomass. That is biomass that is being used with very low efficiency. And that not to mention all the biomass that we actually not using at all, that is being just wasted. Wherever you go, there is biomass in one way or another. And in the city too, there is a lot of biomass, because we have a lot of organic matter coming out of food rests and all kinds. So bioenergy, I think, will always play an important part in the system in one way or another, because we are in a planet where we have the photosynthesis and we transform solar energy into another form and process it. So wherever you have, as long as we need to eat, there will be crop residues. As long as we need to build houses, there will be residues of wood. As long as we have cities and we are eating, and as we will have residues of other things that we use that come from organic materials, then we will have also that in the cities. So actually exploring in a much more efficient way the biomass that is available, besides the discussion on crops, just planting crops for biomass, for energy, may not be the best way of using bioenergy. But at least in the short run, maybe, but in the long run,
to look for what's
possibly
already
not.
in the system.
Yes, but there will be
Move to a
always a
circular
lot in the exactly.
economy in a more. Yeah, I would like to open this to the room. I wonder if there's a question. Yes, there's one right there. I would like you to move to the microphone and state your name and ask your question, please.
Hello, my name is David. I'm from Australia, so forgive the accent. We've spoken a lot about energy generation. Is there any comments you have about energy storage? Does affordable and effective energy storage, does that have a good effect on whether it's the global availability of energy, or does that change anything in terms of the energy generation?
That's a very good question. And I find this is something that's talked about a lot, but certainly to me it's difficult to judge the scale of the impact these kinds of solutions could have. Does anyone have an answer there? Semida Silveira.
Well, you want to start?
Henric? Semida.
Well, I think it's a good question, yes, because as a lot of the attention has been put in the energy conversion. And now we are looking a little bit more closely to storage. And as we develop more understanding and more alternatives for storage, we are shaking the system, of course. We are shaking the system. So it is going to transform, to have a great impact in the way we organize the energy system.
Henric Bergsåker.
No, I agree. It's a relevant question. It's very important, especially if you want to have a lot of wind power, solar power in the system, because it's intermittent energy source. So then storage or distributing power is very important.
Do we have another question from the room? Yes, please.
My name is Fredrik Westerberg. I have a nuclear question. It's not a fusion question, rather the old technology. So I would like to know, is there any thorium reactor ideas or any comment about that? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't understand the question. Does any...
Yes, it's a variety of nuclear reactor related to those we use nowadays.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have a question? An answer? Yes, please.
Dealing with social sciences, maybe Henric can join me in answering as well. But yes, there are some ideas, and also in operation somehow, at least on a research basis in, for instance, India, who's developing that technology. But I think your question hiding another question, if it's less risky to use thorium, right, from proliferation of.
Well, let's assume
nuclear
that is the question. Do you agree that it is?
I think. Okay, I'm not an expert in this. Okay, but that's what I have heard. At least it's harder to use thorium for nuclear weapons production. Of course, you could use it. That's what I heard, at least. But it takes more skills and R&D to do that.
Henric, would you like to come in briefly? Do you have an opinion on this?
No, I believe there is a lot of potential, but I don't think I can comment well on that question, really.
But can I just say, yes, yes, there is potential there, but I don't think it solved the problem, because of nuclear material will end someday anyway, even thorium. I think IEA had come to the conclusion that we have uranium that will last 100 years from now if we use uranium at the scale we do today. I don't know if that's an accurate figure, but what I'm trying to say is more and more reactors mean more uranium to use. Okay, we could have faster reactors that use less and so on and so forth, but still. We're
running out of time. I'm going to have to ask you a really big question, and then I'm just going to ask each of you for a very small answer. Let's say that, of course, we should bring, for all the reasons outlined earlier, we should bring all of the developing world on board and make energy accessible to all. Do these countries have to go through the same errors we have? Or can they hack the path and move into sort of sustainable production and consumption of energy immediately? I will ask you for this final opinion. We start with you, Dr. Wellinger.
I'm afraid they're going to do it, but this is up to the developed world to avoid that, because making a shortcut means investing money. And as long as the Western countries don't invest enough money in developing countries, they're going to make the same mistake. So it's really a question of money and politics.
Very
To
briefly,
be very
Thomas
short
Jonter.
and very imprecise.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I agree. We need more of cooperation, honest cooperation, and taking out of this trapped in the pet dependency. And we have to be honest. I mean, we see a lot of bad things going on in China in terms of producing energy, but they also invest a lot of financial means in solar energy and alternative energy, more than United States, for instance, in nominal terms at least.
Yeah. Very briefly, Semida Silveira.
Yeah, I think that you can expect that it will be different. And I think it's going to be much more different than we want to believe now. Because in the same way we have seen, the best way of comparing would be to look at the telecommunications area, where you have had a penetration completely different in the developing countries. And I think in energy the same thing can happen if we actually allow ourselves to think the energy system completely differently.
I'm sorry to say we run out of time. Henric, I'm going to limit you to a yes or no answer.
Okay.
Do they have to make the same mistakes as we have?
No, not quite.
Wonderful. I would love to continue this discussion all night, but unfortunately we have run out of time. Crosstalks will be back on February 19th with more great minds and intelligent discussions. Be sure to check in at crosstalks.tv for updates on topics and guests. Until then, be safe and be brave.